When Marcus Reynolds walked into Manhattan's most exclusive charity gala with his Instagram model Fiancée, he thought he owned the night. Then his pregnant ex-wife entered on the arm of the city's most mysterious billionaire, and everything changed. What Marcus didn't know was that his discarded wife had discovered his darkest secrets, and she wasn't just seeking revenge, she was seeking justice. This is the story of how a woman who lost everything became the architect of the most spectacular downfall in New York's elite circles. If you love stories about resilience, justice, and the ultimate comeback, smash that like button and subscribe, because this 60-minute journey will leave you speechless. Let's dive in. The Hope for Tomorrow Charity Gala was Manhattan's most exclusive event, where billionaires wrote seven-figure checks while sipping champagne that cost more than most people's cars. Tonight, however, the usual backdrop of wealth and power would witness something far more dramatic than any donation announcement. Marcus Reynolds stood near the center of the gilded ballroom, his arm wrapped possessively around Victoria Sterling. At 35, Marcus had built his crypto empire from nothing, and tonight he planned to cement his status among New York's elite. Victoria, stunning in gold sequins, was his trophy, 24 years old, 5 million Instagram followers, and exactly the kind of woman who looked perfect in photographs. The cameras loved them. Marcus had made sure of that, tipping off every society photographer in the city. This was supposed to be their night, their grand announcement. Victoria's engagement ring, a 10-carat diamond that cost more than most people's houses, caught the light as she posed for another selfie. Then the ballroom doors opened. A hush fell over the crowd as Sarah Collins entered, and every head turned to stare. 6 months pregnant. She moved with quiet confidence, her hand resting protectively on her growing belly. But what sent shockwaves through the room wasn't Sarah's presence. It was the man beside her. James Morrison, known as Hawk to his friends, was a ghost in Manhattan society. The billionaire defense contractor rarely appeared at public events, preferring to work in shadows. When he did emerge, it was always for something important. Tonight, he'd emerged for Sarah. Marcus felt his throat go dry. Victoria's smile faltered as she recognized the woman who was supposed to be broken, defeated, forgotten. Instead, Sarah looked radiant in midnight blue silk, her pregnancy making her appear not vulnerable, but powerful, like a queen carrying the future. The whispers started immediately. Phone cameras turned from Marcus and Victoria to capture this unexpected entrance. Social media notifications began pinging as the news spread. Sarah Collins, Marcus Reynolds' discarded ex-wife, had just walked into Manhattan's most exclusive gala with the city's most mysterious billionaire. Victoria gripped Marcus's arm tighter, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his expensive tuxedo. This wasn't supposed to happen. Sarah was supposed to be in some cheap apartment, working some dead-end job, crying over what she'd lost. She wasn't supposed to be here, glowing with confidence and success, making Victoria look desperate and overdressed by comparison. Sarah met Marcus's gaze across the room, and for just a moment, something passed between them. Not love, not even hatred, but acknowledgement. She'd survived what he'd done to her. More than survived, she'd thrived. Hawk leaned down to whisper something in Sarah's ear, and she laughed, a genuine sound of joy that carried across the ballroom. It was the kind of laugh Sarah used to share with Marcus, back when he was nobody special and she was the only person who believed in him. Now Marcus was somebody, and Sarah was somebody else entirely, someone he no longer recognized, someone he'd underestimated completely. The evening had barely begun, but already Marcus knew his carefully orchestrated plans were crumbling. The cameras that were supposed to capture his triumph were now documenting his past, walking back into his life, pregnant and powerful, with the one man in New York he couldn't compete with. Victoria tried to regain control, pulling Marcus toward a group of investors for photos, but the damage was done. The story of the night was no longer Marcus Reynolds and his influencer fiancée. It was Sarah Collins and her mysterious billionaire, and everyone in the room knew it. As Sarah and Hawk moved through the crowd, greeting people with ease and grace, Marcus realized something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't coincidence. Sarah's appearance tonight, with Hawk Morrison no less, was calculated, strategic, and perfectly timed. His ex-wife, the woman he dismissed as weak and ordinary, had just declared war, and she'd chosen her battlefield wisely. 6 months before the gala that would change everything. Sarah Collins believed she was living a fairy tale. The penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, the closet full of designer clothes she never asked for, the credit cards with no limits. It all seemed like a dream come true for a girl from Ohio who'd spent 4 years in military logistics before meeting Marcus. Marcus had been different then, hungry and brilliant, working 18-hour days to build his cryptocurrency platform. Sarah had managed his schedule, handled his investors, and been his anchor when the pressure threatened to break him. She'd believed they were partners building something together. That Tuesday evening, Sarah had planned everything perfectly. Marcus's favorite meal was warming in the oven, candles were lit throughout the apartment, and she'd even bought champagne to celebrate the news she'd been dying to share for 3 days. The pregnancy test results tucked in her purse would make all their dreams complete. She heard Marcus's key in the lock at 7:30, earlier than usual, and felt a flutter of excitement. Maybe tonight would be the beginning of their new chapter as a family. But Marcus didn't walk through the door alone. Victoria Sterling sauntered in first, her blonde hair catching the candlelight, wearing Sarah's silk robe, the one Marcus had given Sarah for their first anniversary. Victoria looked around the apartment like she owned it, which Sarah would soon learn. She basically did. "Oh," Victoria said, not sounding surprised at all. "You're home early." Sarah stood frozen in the doorway to the kitchen, still wearing her apron, still holding the wooden spoon she'd been using to stir the sauce. "Marcus," she whispered. Marcus followed Victoria inside, loosening his tie with the casual indifference of a man who'd already moved on. He didn't meet Sarah's eyes when he spoke. "We need to talk," he said. But Victoria spoke first, settling onto the couch like she lived there. "Actually, I think we're past talking. Marcus told me you two have been having problems for months." "Problems?" Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Marcus, what is she talking about? What problems?" That's when Marcus finally looked at her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not anger, not even guilt, but cold indifference. Like she was a problem to be solved rather than the woman who'd stood by him through everything. "You don't understand my world anymore, Sarah," Marcus said. "You never did. I need someone who gets the pressure, the lifestyle, the expectations." Victoria smiled from the couch, pulling out her phone to start recording. "Sorry, babe, but this is going to make amazing content. Real-life drama, you know." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "You're filming this 24/7 documentation of my life," Victoria replied cheerfully. "My followers eat this stuff up. The girlfriend upgrade story is going to be huge." That's when Sarah understood. This wasn't just betrayal, it was entertainment. Her marriage, her life, her heart breaking in real time was content for Victoria's social media empire. Marcus walked to the bar and poured himself a scotch, not offering one to Sarah. "I've already talked to my lawyers about the divorce. The prenup you signed covers everything pretty clearly." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her belly, protecting the secret growing there. "Marcus, please, can we talk alone?" "There's nothing to talk about," he said. "Victoria and I are getting married. You have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live." Victoria stretched luxuriously on the couch, making sure her phone captured every angle. "Don't worry, Sarah. I'm sure you'll find someone eventually. Maybe someone more on your level. Like a teacher or something normal." The cruelty was casual, devastating, complete. Sarah stood in her own kitchen, wearing her own apron, surrounded by the life she'd helped build, and realized she'd never really belonged there at all. She walked to the bedroom on unsteady legs, packed a suitcase with shaking hands, and left without another word. Behind her, she could hear Victoria's laughter as she narrated the evening's events for her followers. Outside on the sidewalk, clutching her suitcase and her purse with the pregnancy test still tucked inside, Sarah Collins began to understand what it meant to lose everything in a single moment. But she hadn't lost everything yet. She still had the secret growing inside her, and she still had something Marcus had forgotten about during his years of success. She'd been trained by the United States Army never to surrender. The war was just beginning. 2 weeks after being thrown out of her own life, Sarah Collins sat in a diner at 3 a.m, counting the cash in her wallet for the 4th time, $47.32. Enough for coffee and maybe a muffin, if she was careful. The prenup Marcus's lawyers had reminded her about was ironclad. 5 years of marriage, and she was entitled to exactly nothing except what she'd brought into the relationship, which was essentially her clothes and her car. A 10-year-old Honda Civic that now doubled as her bedroom. The pregnancy symptoms were getting worse. Morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion so complete she could barely think straight, and the constant fear that stress would hurt the baby. She'd found a job at a veterans nonprofit organization, but the pay barely covered food, let alone rent in New York City. The media attention had been swift and brutal. Marcus and Victoria's engagement announcement came with carefully planted stories about the bitter ex-wife who couldn't handle success. Victoria's followers had found Sarah's social media accounts and flooded them with cruel comments until Sarah finally deleted everything. Sarah stared at her reflection in the diner's window and barely recognized herself. Dark circles under her eyes, clothes that hung loose everywhere except her growing belly, hair that hadn't seen a decent salon in months. She looked exactly like what the tabloids called her, a woman who'd lost everything. Her phone buzzed with another unknown number. Reporters had been calling for weeks, wanting statements about Marcus and Victoria's whirlwind romance. Sarah let it go to voicemail like all the others. But when she played the message back, the voice wasn't a reporter. "Mrs. Collins, this is Rebecca Martinez from the Morrison Foundation. Mr. James Morrison would like to discuss a potential partnership with your organization. If you're available tomorrow at 10, we'd like to invite you to his office." Sarah stared at the phone. The Morrison Foundation was one of the largest philanthropic organizations in the country. James Morrison, Hawk Morrison, was a legend in defense contracting and veteran advocacy. His donations had funded hospitals, schools, and veteran support programs across the nation. Why would someone like that want to meet with someone like her? The next morning, Sarah used her last $20 to take a cab to the Morrison Foundation offices in Midtown. The building was sleek glass and steel, the kind of place where serious money got distributed to serious causes. Rebecca Martinez, Morrison's assistant, led Sarah through hallways lined with photographs of schools in rural communities, medical facilities in war zones, and veterans receiving prosthetic limbs. The Morrison Foundation didn't just write checks, they changed lives. Hawk Morrison's office was surprisingly modest, no expensive art or gold fixtures, just functional furniture, military memorabilia, and walls covered with thank you letters from people his foundation had helped. The man himself was nothing like Sarah had expected, tall and lean with graying temples. Hawk moved with the controlled precision of someone who'd seen combat. His handshake was firm but brief, his smile genuine but reserved. There was something about his presence that made Sarah feel safer than she had in months. "Miss Collins," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming. I've been following your work with Veterans United. Impressive results with limited resources." Sarah blinked in surprise. "You know about our programs. I make it my business to know about organizations that actually help veterans instead of just talking about it. Your job placement program has a 93% success rate. That's better than most government initiatives." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a spark of pride. "We focus on skills translation, helping veterans understand that their military experience is valuable in civilian careers." Hawk nodded approvingly. "Which brings me to why you're here. The Morrison Foundation wants to fund a citywide expansion of your program. $2 million to start, with more if the results justify it." Sarah's mouth fell open. $2 million, I don't understand. Why us? Why now?" "Because you understand something most people don't, that real change happens one person at a time, with dignity and respect." Hawk leaned back in his chair. "I've also heard about your personal situation. I want you to know that won't affect our decision. Good work is good work, regardless of tabloid gossip." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. For the first time since Marcus had destroyed her life, someone was seeing her for what she could do rather than what had been done to her. "There's one condition," Hawk continued. "I want to be personally involved in the program development. This isn't just a check, it's a partnership." Sarah wiped her eyes and sat up straighter. "Mr. Morrison, I don't know how to thank you." "Call me Hawk, and you can thank me by changing some lives." As Sarah left the Morrison Foundation offices with a signed partnership agreement and a $2 million commitment, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. She didn't know yet that this meeting would change everything, or that Hawk Morrison had his own reasons for reaching out to her. All she knew was that someone believed in her again, and that was enough to start fighting back. 3 months into their partnership, Sarah barely recognized her own life. The Veterans United program had exploded from a cramped office in Queens to a sleek facility in Manhattan, with satellite locations planned for Brooklyn and the Bronx. More importantly, they were changing lives at a pace that surprised even Sarah. Hawk had been true to his word about personal involvement. He showed up to planning meetings, visited job sites, and talked to veterans about their experiences. Unlike the wealthy donors Sarah had met through Marcus, people who wrote checks for tax benefits and photo opportunities, Hawk genuinely cared about results. What surprised Sarah was how much she looked forward to their working lunches and strategy sessions. Hawk was brilliant but never condescending, successful but not arrogant. When he talked about his own military service, Navy SEAL, 3 tours in Afghanistan, he did so without bragging, focusing instead on what he'd learned about leadership and resilience. "You remind me of my commanding officer," Hawk told her over coffee one afternoon as they reviewed expansion plans. "Captain Rodriguez never accepted that something couldn't be done. She just found a different way to do it." Sarah smiled, feeling her cheeks warm at the compliment. At 5 months pregnant, she was finally starting to feel like herself again, confident, capable, ready to take on the world. High praise from someone who's accomplished what you have. "What I've accomplished is making money," Hawk said quietly. "What you're accomplishing is making a difference. There's a distinction." Their relationship had remained strictly professional, But Sarah couldn't deny the connection she felt. Hawk treated her like an equal partner, sought her opinions on foundation business beyond their program, and somehow made her feel brilliant and capable instead of broken and discarded. The media had taken notice too. Articles in the New York Times and Wall Street Journal highlighted the Veterans United success story, with photographs of Sarah leading tours through their facilities. The narrative was shifting from bitter ex-wife to rising nonprofit star. Marcus had noticed the coverage. He'd started texting her, casual messages that tried to sound friendly, but felt desperate. Saw the article in the Times. Proud of you. Coffee sometime, miss talking to you. Hope you're taking care of yourself. Sarah deleted every message without responding. Victoria had noticed too, and her social media posts had taken on a sharper edge. Subtle digs about desperate women using their situations for attention and fake feminists who need men to succeed. The comments were vague enough to maintain plausible deniability, but obvious enough that Sarah's friends started sending her screenshots. Sarah was learning to ignore the noise and focus on the work. Today's victory was particularly sweet. They'd just placed their 500th veteran in a permanent job, a milestone that meant 500 families had steady income and health insurance. "We should celebrate," Hawk said as they reviewed the latest placement statistics in Sarah's office. "Pizza party for the staff," Sarah suggested, but Hawk shook his head. "I was thinking dinner, somewhere nice, just the two of us." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Sarah, I hope you know this partnership means more to me than just the foundation work." Sarah's heart skipped, but before she could respond, her assistant knocked on the door. "Sarah, there are some people here to see you. They say they're from the district attorney's office." 3 investigators in dark suits entered Sarah's office, their expressions serious. The lead investigator, a woman in her 40s, showed her badge and identification. "Miss Collins, I'm Detective Rivera from the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. We need to ask you some questions about your ex-husband's business practices." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "What kind of questions?" "We're investigating irregularities in the CoinVault cryptocurrency platform, money laundering, securities fraud, tax evasion. We understand you were married to Marcus Reynolds during the early development of the platform." Hawk stood up immediately. "Sarah, you don't have to answer anything without a lawyer present." Detective Rivera's gaze shifted to Hawk with what looked like recognition. "Mr. Morrison, I wasn't expecting to see you here." Something passed between them that Sarah didn't understand, a look that suggested they knew each other, that this visit might not be as random as it seemed. "Sarah," Detective Rivera continued, "your ex-husband is in serious trouble. If you have any information about his business practices, now would be the time to share it." Sarah's mind raced. Marcus had always been secretive about the technical details of his business, but she'd handled his early correspondence, managed his calendar, knew his investors and partners. If there had been illegal activity, she might have unknowingly been involved. "I need to think about this," Sarah said. "Can I call you tomorrow?" After the investigators left, Sarah turned to Hawk, who was staring out the window with an expression she'd never seen before, calculating, almost predatory. "Hawk, did you know they were coming?" He was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Sarah, there are some things about me you don't know. About why I really wanted to partner with your organization." The hope and happiness Sarah had been feeling began to crack. "What kind of things?" "The kind that might make you hate me," Hawk said quietly. "But the kind that might also give you justice." Sarah sank into her chair, one hand on her growing belly, and realized that nothing in her life was as simple as it seemed. The partnership that had saved her, the man who might love her, the new life she was building. All of it was connected to Marcus in ways she was only beginning to understand. The war she thought she'd escaped was about to begin in earnest. Sarah stared at Hawk across her office, feeling the careful foundation of her new life beginning to crack. "What aren't you telling me?" Hawk moved to the window, his military bearing even more pronounced under stress. When he turned back to face her, his expression was a mixture of guilt and determination. "I've been investigating Marcus for 2 years," he said quietly. "The Morrison Foundation partnership was real, but it wasn't the only reason I reached out to you." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You've been investigating Marcus for what?" "Money laundering through CoinVault. Marcus has been using his cryptocurrency platform to clean money for some very dangerous people, Russian oligarchs, cartel leaders, arms dealers. The FBI estimates he's laundered over $200 million in the past 3 years. Sarah sank deeper into her chair. "And you think I knew about this?" "No." Hawk's response was immediate and firm. "Everything I learned about you told me you were completely innocent. That's part of why I wanted to help you. You were a victim of Marcus's crimes, just like everyone else he's hurt." "But you used me," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You used our partnership, our friendship, to get closer to your investigation." Hawk moved closer, his eyes intense. "It started that way. I won't lie to you about that. But Sarah, what's grown between us? That's real. That's completely separate from anything involving Marcus." Sarah felt tears threatening again. Just when she'd started to believe her life was getting better. Just when she'd begun to hope that someone could care about her for herself. It turned out even that was connected to Marcus and his lies. "How long have you been working with the FBI?" "I'm not FBI. I'm a private contractor who specializes in financial crimes involving defense and international security. When Marcus's platform started showing up in terrorism financing reports, they asked me to investigate." Sarah laughed bitterly. "So I've gone from being the wife of a criminal to being the asset of a spy. Great upgrade." "You're not my asset," Hawk said fiercely. "You're the strongest, most capable woman I've ever met. Everything you've built, everything you've accomplished, that's all you—" "Sarah, I just provided funding. Funding from an investigation budget. Funding from my personal foundation, which exists completely separately from my consulting work." Hawk pulled out his phone and showed her bank records. "Every penny came from Morrison Foundation accounts that have nothing to do with law enforcement." Sarah studied the documents, her analytical mind working through the implications. "The investigators who came here today, they know about your involvement. Detective Rivera is the lead prosecutor on the case. She knows I've been investigating Marcus, and she knows about our foundation partnership. What she doesn't know is that my feelings for you are completely genuine." "How can I believe that?" Sarah's voice broke. "How can I believe anything you've told me? Maybe this baby is just convenient cover for your investigation. Maybe—" "Stop." Hawk's voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiral. "Sarah Collins, you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. Your pregnancy, your strength, your dedication to helping people, none of that has anything to do with Marcus Reynolds or my investigation. If you take nothing else away from this conversation, believe that." Sarah wanted to believe him. The past 3 months had been the happiest she'd felt since before her marriage started falling apart. The work they'd done together, the connection she'd felt, the way he looked at her like she was precious. If it was all manipulation, it was the cruelest kind. "What happens now?" she asked. "That depends on you. The investigation is moving forward regardless. Marcus is going down. The evidence is overwhelming. But if you're willing to help, if you can provide information about his early business practices, it would make the case even stronger." "Help how?" Hawk hesitated. "Marcus has been trying to contact you, right? The investigators want to know if you'd be willing to meet with him while wearing a recording device." Sarah felt cold despite the warm office. "You want me to spy on my ex-husband while I'm pregnant with his baby. I want you to help put a criminal in prison who's been funding terrorism and drug cartels while destroying the lives of everyone who trusted him, including yours." The brutal honesty of it was almost refreshing after months of lies and manipulation. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. Marcus had betrayed her in the most personal way possible. He'd thrown away their marriage for social media fame and public validation. He'd left her homeless and struggling while he lived in luxury with the woman who'd helped destroy their life together. If he was also a criminal who'd been endangering innocent people while she was handling his schedule and managing his image, then maybe she owed it to his victims to help stop him. "What would I have to do?" "Meet him somewhere public. Let him talk. The recording device is almost invisible, and there would be agents nearby for your protection." Sarah thought about the text messages Marcus had been sending, the casual way he'd reached out like nothing had happened between them. Maybe it was time to finally respond. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I need to know that you're telling me the truth about everything. About the investigation, about the foundation, about your feelings. I can't handle any more lies. Hawk, I won't survive any more betrayal." Hawk moved to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Sarah, I swear on my military service and my honor as a man. Everything I've told you about my feelings is true. I'm in love with you. Not because of Marcus, not because of any investigation, but because you're brilliant and strong and kind, and being around you makes me want to be better than I am." Sarah looked into his eyes and saw something she'd never seen in Marcus's: complete honesty, even when that honesty was painful. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll help you catch him." 2 days later, Sarah sat in a coffee shop in Soho, wearing a wire so sophisticated it looked like a designer button on her maternity dress. 3 FBI agents were positioned around the cafe, disguised as customers reading newspapers and typing on laptops. Hawk was across the street in a surveillance van, listening to every word. Marcus arrived 15 minutes late, which was typical. He looked good, expensive haircut, designer suit, the kind of confident swagger that came with believing you were untouchable. He'd always carried himself like the most important person in any room, and apparently impending federal charges hadn't changed that. "Sarah," he said, sliding into the chair across from her with a smile that once would have melted her heart. "You look amazing. Pregnancy suits you." "Thank you," Sarah replied carefully. The FBI had coached her to let Marcus lead the conversation, to seem receptive but not eager. Marcus ordered an elaborate coffee drink and spent several minutes talking about Victoria's latest social media campaign and his expanding business interests. To anyone listening, he sounded like a successful entrepreneur without a care in the world. "I've been thinking about us a lot lately," Marcus said eventually. "About how things ended. I handled it badly. Sarah, I was selfish and cruel, and I'm sorry." Sarah felt a twist of old pain but pushed it aside. "Why are you apologizing now, Marcus?" "Because I miss you. Victoria she's exciting, but she's not you. She doesn't understand me the way you do. She doesn't care about the business, about building something meaningful." The irony was staggering. Marcus was lamenting that his influencer fiancée didn't care about his criminal enterprise the way his ex-wife had unknowingly supported it. "What is it you want from me?" Sarah asked. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was an intimate whisper. I want to make things right. I know I hurt you, but we were good together. Sarah, we understood each other. We built something amazing. We built something illegal. You mean... The words slipped out before Sarah could stop them. Marcus's eyes sharpened, and for a moment she saw a flash of something dangerous. What are you talking about? Sarah's heart was racing, but she forced herself to stay calm. Marcus, I'm not stupid. The late night calls, the mysterious investors, the cash payments you thought I didn't notice. I kept your books for 3 years. I know CoinVault wasn't just a cryptocurrency platform. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. When he spoke again, his tone was completely different, colder, more calculating. What exactly do you think you know? I know you were moving money for people who couldn't use traditional banking. I know some of your biggest investors weren't venture capitalists. And I know the FBI has been investigating you for months. Marcus's mask dropped completely. The charming, apologetic ex-husband disappeared, replaced by someone Sarah barely recognized. What have you told them? Nothing yet, Sarah said. But Marcus, they have enough evidence to destroy you. Money transfers, communication records, financial documents. They don't need me to make their case. Then why are you here? This was the moment the FBI had prepared her for. The moment when she would give Marcus a choice, cooperate with the investigation or go down with his criminal partners. Because I thought you might want a chance to save yourself, Sarah said. If you cooperate, if you help them understand how the money laundering worked, they might be willing to make a deal. Marcus laughed, a sound with no humor in it. A deal, Sarah. Do you have any idea who my business partners are? Do you understand what happens to people who cooperate with federal investigations? I understand what happens to people who fund terrorists and drug cartels, Sarah replied. I understand what happens to women who unknowingly help their husbands commit crimes. Marcus, I could go to prison too because of what you did. That seemed to get through to him. Marcus's expression softened slightly. Sarah, you were never in danger. Everything was compartmentalized. Your name isn't on any of the problematic accounts. How generous of you to keep your pregnant wife out of your criminal conspiracy. I was protecting you, Marcus said, just like I'm trying to protect you now. Sarah, if you're working with the FBI, you need to stop. These aren't people you can testify against and then go into witness protection. These are people who will find you and hurt you and your baby if they think you're a threat. The threat was clear, even if Marcus was framing it as concern. Sarah felt her baby move, as if responding to her elevated heart rate. So what do you suggest I do? Come back to me, Marcus said. Break up with Morrison, move back into the penthouse, marry me again if that's what it takes. I can protect you if you're family, but I can't help you if you're working against me. Sarah stared at him in amazement. Even now, facing federal charges and criminal partners who might kill him, Marcus thought the solution was for her to give up her new life and submit to his control again. What about Victoria? Marcus shrugged. Victoria is a business arrangement. You're the mother of my child. The casual dismissal of his fiancée, the assumption that Sarah would abandon her independence and self-respect, the complete lack of remorse for any of his crimes. It crystallized everything Sarah had learned about the man she'd once loved. No, she said simply. No what? No, I won't come back to you. No, I won't stop cooperating with the investigation. And no, I won't let you use this baby to manipulate me. Sarah stood up, her hand on her belly. Goodbye, Marcus. I hope you make better choices in prison than you did in our marriage. As Sarah walked out of the coffee shop, she heard Marcus calling her name. his voice sharp with panic. She didn't turn around. Behind her, she knew FBI agents were moving in to make their arrest. Across the street, Hawk was waiting by his car. When Sarah reached him, he pulled her into his arms without speaking. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other while police sirens approached the cafe. "It's over," Sarah whispered. "No," Hawk said quietly. "It's just beginning. But Sarah, you were incredible in there. You were brave and smart and strong, and I'm so proud of you." For the first time since this nightmare began, Sarah believed him completely. Whatever happened next, she would face it as herself, not as Marcus's wife or victim, but as Sarah Collins, the woman who'd chosen justice over fear. The arrest of Marcus Reynolds made headlines across the country. Crypto King, charged with terrorism financing, dominated the front page of every major newspaper, while cable news ran endless segments about the multi-million-dollar money laundering operation that had hidden in plain sight. Sarah watched the coverage from Hawk's apartment, where she'd been staying since federal marshals determined that her own place wasn't secure enough. The baby was due in 6 weeks, and the stress of testifying before grand juries and meeting with prosecutors wasn't doing either of them any favors. Victoria Sterling's response to Marcus's arrest had been swift and calculated. Within hours of the news breaking, she'd posted a tearful video to Instagram claiming she'd been deceived and manipulated, that she'd had no idea about Marcus's criminal activities. Her comment sections filled with supportive messages from followers who believed she was another victim. But Sarah knew better. During her marriage to Marcus, she'd seen enough of Victoria's behind-the-scenes maneuvering to recognize a strategy when she saw one. Victoria wasn't just distancing herself from Marcus, she was positioning herself to profit from the scandal. The reality was confirmed when Detective Rivera called Sarah with an update on the investigation. "We've been monitoring Victoria Sterling's communications since the arrest," Rivera said over a secure phone line. "She's been in contact with several media outlets offering to sell her story. She's also been reaching out to Marcus's business associates, trying to negotiate some kind of ongoing relationship." Sarah felt a chill. "What kind of ongoing relationship?" "The kind where she helps them move their money to new platforms in exchange for a percentage of the profits. Ms. Sterling wasn't as innocent as she's claiming to be." This revelation shouldn't have surprised Sarah, but it did. Even after everything she'd learned about people's capacity for betrayal and self-interest, she'd still assumed that Victoria was simply a social climber who'd gotten in over her head. "Are you going to arrest her?" "We're building the case, but Sarah, this is why we're concerned about your security. Victoria knows you're cooperating with our investigation, and she's desperate to avoid prison. Desperate people make dangerous choices." After the call, Sarah found Hawk in his home office, reviewing security footage from the building's cameras. He'd been increasingly protective since Marcus's arrest, barely letting Sarah out of his sight. "Rivera thinks Victoria might try something," Sarah told him. Hawk's jaw tightened. "I know. I've been tracking her social media activity and her location data. She's been driving past this building at least twice a day for the past week. Maybe we should consider the safe house option Rivera mentioned." "Maybe we should consider you moving in here permanently," Hawk said quietly. Sarah looked at him in surprise. They'd been growing closer over the past months, but between the investigation and her pregnancy, they'd carefully avoided defining their relationship. "Hawk, you don't have to. I'm not offering out of obligation," he interrupted. "Sarah, I love you. I love your strength, your integrity, the way you fight for people who need help. I want to build a life with you, raise your baby with you, create the kind of partnership we've already started with the foundation." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. After months of uncertainty and fear, The idea of genuine love and security felt almost too good to believe. What about the investigation? What about Marcus's criminal partners? What about Victoria? What about them? Hawk stood up and moved to where Sarah was sitting. Sarah, I've faced down terrorists in Afghanistan and arms dealers in Eastern Europe. I'm not afraid of a crypto criminal and his influencer girlfriend, but I am afraid of losing you. Sarah reached up to touch his face. You're not going to lose me. Then say yes. Move in with me. Let me protect you and love you and help you raise this baby. Let me be your partner in everything, not just the foundation. Before Sarah could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number, which usually meant reporters, but something made her answer anyway. Is this Sarah Collins? The voice was unfamiliar, nervous. Who is this? My name is Jennifer Walsh. I used to work for Victoria Sterling as her assistant. I need to talk to you about something important, something dangerous. Sarah put the call on speaker so Hawk could hear. What kind of something? Victoria's been planning something since Marcus got arrested. She blames you for ruining her life, and she's not planning to just sit back and let you testify against them. Can we meet somewhere? There are things you need to know. Sarah looked at Hawk, who was already reaching for his secure phone to call Detective Rivera. Jennifer, are you saying Victoria is planning to hurt me? I'm saying Victoria Sterling is a lot more dangerous than anyone realizes, and you need to be very, very careful. The line went dead, leaving Sarah and Hawk staring at each other in the sudden silence. Well, Sarah said quietly, I guess that answers the question about whether Victoria's as innocent as she claims. Hawk was already moving toward his gun safe. Pack a bag. We're going to the safe house tonight. Hawk, wait. No waiting. No more risks. Sarah, I almost lost you once to Marcus's lies. I'm not losing you to Victoria's revenge. As Sarah packed her things, she felt the baby kick strongly. As if responding to her stress, she placed both hands on her belly and whispered, It's okay, little one. We're going to be safe. Uncle Hawk is going to make sure of it. The endearment slipped out naturally, and Sarah realized she'd already made her decision about Hawk's proposal. Whatever happened with Victoria, whatever dangers they still faced, she wanted to face them together. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, coating the city in deceptive beauty. But Sarah wasn't fooled by appearances anymore. She'd learned the hard way that the most dangerous threats often came from the people you trusted most. This time, though, she wasn't facing the danger alone. The safe house was a nondescript brownstone in Brooklyn, indistinguishable from dozens of others on the quiet residential street. Sarah had been there for 3 days, going stir-crazy with boredom and anxiety while federal agents worked to track down Victoria and assess the threat level. Jennifer Walsh, Victoria's former assistant, had provided a disturbing picture of Victoria's state of mind since Marcus's arrest. According to Jennifer, Victoria had been consumed with rage at Sarah, blaming her for destroying what Victoria saw as her ticket to permanent wealth and status. She's not just angry, Jennifer had told Detective Rivera during her interview. She's obsessed. She has pictures of Sarah on her wall, news articles about the investigation, photos from the Veterans United events. She talks about Sarah like she stole her life. What made it worse was Victoria's access to resources. Her social media empire, while built on lies, generated millions in revenue. She had connections to photographers, private investigators, and the kind of people who could be hired to cause trouble. Most dangerously, she had followers who believed her victim narrative and might be willing to help her get justice. Hawk barely left Sarah's side, working remotely from the safe house while coordinating with his security team. He'd hired additional protection, vetted every delivery person and visitor, and installed security systems that would make the Pentagon jealous. On Thursday afternoon, Detective Rivera arrived with news that made everyone's blood run cold. "We found Victoria's apartment," Rivera said, setting a laptop on the dining room table. "What we discovered suggests she's been planning something for weeks." The photos on Rivera's screen showed a disturbing shrine to obsession. Victoria had covered an entire wall with images of Sarah, photos from charity events, screenshots from news interviews, even pictures that appeared to be taken with telephoto lenses from outside the Morrison Foundation offices. But worse than the photos were the documents. Victoria had compiled detailed information about Sarah's daily routines, her medical appointments, her favorite restaurants. She'd mapped out security protocols at the Veterans United facilities and identified potential vulnerabilities in Sarah's protection. "This is the planning of someone who's moved beyond anger into full stalking behavior," Rivera explained. "But we still haven't located her. She cleared out of the apartment 2 days ago, and she's been staying off social media." "What about her followers?" Sarah asked. "Can't you track her through her online activity?" "That's actually our biggest concern." Rivera replied, "Yesterday, Victoria posted a live video to her Instagram claiming that you've been threatening her, trying to frame her for crimes she didn't commit. She's portraying herself as a victim of government overreach and you as a vindictive ex-wife trying to destroy innocent people." Rivera showed them clips from Victoria's video. Even in her desperation, Victoria was a masterful performer. Tears streaming down her face, voice breaking with emotion. She painted herself as a young woman who'd fallen in love with the wrong man and was now being persecuted for it. "The FBI is using Sarah Collins as a weapon against anyone who threatens their narrative," Victoria had said to her camera. "They're turning victims against each other while the real criminals go free. I won't let them destroy my life to protect their lies." Her followers are eating it up, Rivera continued. "The video has been shared 50,000 times, and the comments are getting increasingly violent. People are offering to help her, to protect her from government persecution." Sarah felt sick. So she's turned this into some kind of conspiracy theory. Worse, she's turned it into a call for vigilante justice. "We've identified at least a dozen followers who live in the New York area and have made specific threats against you. We're working to track them down." But Hawk's phone buzzed with an alert from his security system. He checked the screen and his expression went dark. "There's someone outside. 3 people, moving toward the house." Rivera was already on her radio, calling for backup units. Through the window, Sarah could see figures in dark clothing approaching from different directions, moving with the coordination of people following a plan. "Basement," Hawk ordered. But before they could move, Sarah's phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the caller ID. "Answer it," Rivera said quickly. "Keep her talking while we locate the signal." Sarah accepted the call and put it on speaker. Victoria's voice filled the room, no longer the polished tone of her social media presence, but raw with fury. "Hello, Sarah. Are you enjoying your government protection?" "Victoria, what do you want?" "I want my life back. I want the lies to stop. I want you to admit that you've been manipulating this whole situation to get revenge on Marcus and destroy me." "Victoria, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted justice for what Marcus did." "Justice?" Victoria laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. "You call stealing my fiancé justice. You call destroying my career justice. You ruined everything. Sarah, everything I worked for, everything I built." Through the window, Sarah could see the figures getting closer. Hawk was checking his weapon while Rivera coordinated with backup units over her radio. "Victoria, Marcus made his own choices. The crimes he committed had nothing to do with you or me. Stop lying." Victoria's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. I know you planned this whole thing. The pregnancy, the billionaire boyfriend, the sob story about being abandoned. You manipulated everyone to feel sorry for you while you destroyed the people who were actually building something meaningful. The delusion was complete. In Victoria's mind, she and Marcus were the victims. Their criminal enterprise was meaningful, and Sarah was the manipulator who'd orchestrated their downfall. Victoria, please listen to me. You're not thinking clearly. Whatever you're planning, it's not going to solve anything. You're going to hurt yourself and other people for no reason. The only person who's going to get hurt is you. Sarah, you took everything from me, and now I'm going to take everything from you. The line went dead just as the first window exploded inward. Hawk tackled Sarah to the floor as glass showered the room. Rivera was shouting commands into her radio while drawing her weapon. Outside, Sarah could hear multiple vehicles approaching, backup units responding to the emergency. Stay down, Hawk ordered, covering Sarah's body with his own as more windows shattered. Rivera, how long until backup arrives? 2 minutes, Rivera replied, positioning herself to cover the front door. But 2 minutes felt like an eternity as objects crashed through the broken windows. Not bullets, but rocks, bottles, and what looked like homemade explosive devices that filled the room with smoke and noise. Through the chaos, Sarah could hear voices shouting outside, Victoria's followers, recruited through social media to help her get justice against the woman they believed had wronged her. Sarah curled into herself, protecting her belly, and realized that Victoria's greatest weapon had always been her ability to make people believe her lies. Even now, facing federal charges and obvious mental breakdown, she'd convinced strangers to risk their own lives to hurt Sarah. But as sirens filled the air and backup units surrounded the house, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected: pity for Victoria. The woman who destroyed Sarah's marriage and stolen her life was so consumed with rage and delusion that she'd thrown away everything, including her freedom, for a moment of revenge that would solve nothing. It's over, Hawk whispered in Sarah's ear as federal agents stormed the building. You're safe. We're safe. Sarah closed her eyes and held on to him, feeling their baby move strongly inside her. Victoria had lost everything in her quest for revenge, but Sarah had found something worth protecting. The real victory wasn't defeating Victoria. It was choosing love over hatred, healing over revenge, and hope over fear. 6 months later, Sarah sat in the witness stand of the Manhattan Federal Courthouse, 8 months pregnant and radiating the quiet confidence that had become her trademark. The trial of Marcus Reynolds and Victoria Sterling had captivated the nation, not just for the scope of their crimes, but for the story of redemption and justice that Sarah represented. Marcus looked smaller than Sarah remembered, diminished by months in federal detention and the weight of overwhelming evidence against him. His cryptocurrency empire had collapsed completely, taking with it the fortunes of investors who'd trusted him and the criminal networks that had relied on his money laundering services. Victoria sat at the defense table, looking nothing like the glamorous influencer who'd once commanded millions of followers. Her social media accounts had been seized as evidence, her brand partnerships canceled, her carefully constructed image destroyed by her own desperate actions. The attack on the safe house had been captured on security cameras, providing undeniable proof of her involvement in conspiracy and attempted assault. Ms. Collins, the prosecutor asked, "Can you tell the jury about your role in Coin Vault during your marriage to the defendant?" Sarah's voice was clear and strong as she described her unknowing participation in Marcus's criminal enterprise. She explained how she'd managed his schedule, handled his correspondence, and organized his business meetings without understanding the true nature of his activities. "I believed I was helping my husband build a legitimate business," Sarah testified. "I trusted him completely, which he used to his advantage. He compartmentalized his illegal activities to ensure that I couldn't accidentally expose them, but he also used my reputation and connections to legitimize his public image. The defense attorneys tried to paint Sarah as a vindictive ex-wife seeking revenge, but her calm testimony and documented evidence made their arguments look desperate. More damaging to their case was the mountain of physical evidence, financial records, recorded conversations, and communication logs that proved both Marcus and Victoria's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. When Marcus's attorney questioned Sarah about her relationship with Hawk, she answered with the honesty that had become her hallmark. James Morrison supported my work because he believed in helping veterans, just as his foundation supports dozens of other organizations. Our personal relationship developed separately from any investigation into my ex-husband. Mr. Morrison has never asked me to do anything that wasn't in the interest of justice and public safety. The most dramatic moment of the trial came when Victoria took the stand in her own defense. Her attorney had clearly advised against it, but Victoria's narcissism wouldn't allow her to remain silent while others controlled her narrative. Sarah Collins orchestrated this entire persecution, Victoria declared, her voice rising with emotion. She couldn't handle that Marcus had moved on, so she manipulated the FBI, her billionaire boyfriend, and the media to destroy us. I'm the real victim here. But under cross-examination, Victoria's composure cracked completely. The prosecutor methodically presented evidence of her involvement in money laundering, her recruitment of followers for the safe house attack, and her attempts to profit from Marcus's criminal activities even after his arrest. Ms. Sterling, are you seriously asking this jury to believe that you had no knowledge of your fiancé's crimes despite living in his penthouse, wearing jewelry purchased with laundered money, and personally meeting with his criminal associates? Victoria's response was a rambling, contradictory mess that destroyed any remaining credibility she might have had. By the time she left the witness stand, even her own attorney looked defeated. The verdicts came after only 6 hours of jury deliberation. Marcus was found guilty on all counts: money laundering, securities fraud, tax evasion, and conspiracy to support terrorist organizations. Victoria was convicted of conspiracy, accessory charges, and assault related to the safe house attack. As the judge read the sentences, 25 years for Marcus, 15 for Victoria, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected: relief mixed with sadness. Justice had been served, but at a tremendous cost to everyone involved. After the trial, Sarah and Hawk stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by reporters and supporters from Veterans United. Sarah's statement to the media was brief but powerful. Today's verdicts represent justice not just for me, but for everyone who was victimized by Marcus Reynolds and Victoria Sterling's criminal activities. The money they laundered funded terrorism and drug trafficking that hurt innocent people around the world. I'm grateful that our legal system held them accountable. A reporter shouted a question about her pregnancy and future plans. Sarah smiled, her hand on her belly. My daughter will be born into a world where her mother fought for what was right, even when it was difficult. That's the legacy I want to leave her, that you never give up on justice, truth, and protecting the people who need it most. That evening, Sarah went into labor. Emma Grace Morrison was born at sunrise on a clear October morning, weighing 7 pounds and 2 ounces. With her mother's determined chin and what would eventually be her father's intense eyes, she entered the world surrounded by love, security, and the promise of a life built on honesty and integrity. Hawk had been in the delivery room, holding Sarah's hand and whispering encouragement during the difficult hours of labor. When Emma finally arrived, he cried with relief and joy, cradling his new daughter like she was made of spun glass. She's perfect, he whispered to Sarah. Absolutely perfect. Sarah looked at her daughter and felt a completeness she'd never experienced before. This tiny person represented everything she'd fought for: hope, healing, and the chance to build something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal and loss. The adoption papers had been filed months earlier. Hawk would officially become Emma's father, giving her his name and all the protection that came with it. Marcus had signed away his parental rights from prison, seemingly eager to sever all connections to the life he'd destroyed. 3 days after Emma's birth, Sarah and Hawk were married in a simple ceremony at the hospital chapel. Sarah wore a flowing dress that accommodated her post-pregnancy body, and Hawk wore his dress military uniform. Emma slept peacefully in Sarah's arms throughout the brief service, occasionally making small sounds that made everyone smile. The media coverage of their wedding was overwhelmingly positive. The story of the betrayed wife who'd found love and justice resonated with millions of people, especially women who'd faced their own betrayals and setbacks. But more important than public approval was the life they were building together. The Morrison Foundation had expanded its veteran services nationwide, with Sarah leading the program development and implementation. Their success rate continued to exceed 90%, and they were helping thousands of veterans transition to civilian careers. Sarah had also started speaking publicly about financial abuse and the warning signs of criminal manipulation in relationships. Her talks were powerful and moving, helping other women recognize when they were being used and find the strength to seek help. Victoria Sterling's followers had largely abandoned her after the trial, moving on to new influencers and causes. A few diehard supporters continued to claim she'd been framed, but their voices were drowned out by overwhelming evidence of her guilt. Victoria herself had been transferred to a medium-security federal prison, where she would spend the next decade and a half. Marcus had been sent to a maximum security facility, where his computer skills and financial crimes background made him a target for both criminal organizations seeking revenge and federal agencies wanting information. His early appeals had been denied, and legal experts agreed he would likely serve his full sentence. On Emma's first birthday, Sarah received an unexpected letter. It was from Marcus, written from prison in the careful handwriting she remembered from their early relationship. Sarah, the letter read, I know I have no right to contact you, and I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. I just wanted you to know that seeing Emma's birth announcement made me realize what I threw away. Not just you, but the chance to be a real father, a real husband, a real man. I chose fame and money and validation from strangers over the love of the only person who ever truly believed in me. I destroyed everything good in my life for things that turned out to be worthless. I'm glad you found happiness with Morrison. I'm glad Emma will have a father who deserves her. And I'm glad you became the strong, successful woman you were always meant to be, even though I tried to keep you from it. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I recognize what I lost. Take care of yourself and Emma. You both deserve every happiness. Marcus. Sarah read the letter twice, then showed it to Hawk. They talked about it that evening while Emma played on the floor between them, babbling happily and reaching for her toys. Do you think he means it? Hawk asked. I think prison has given him time to understand what he threw away, Sarah replied. But Marcus always was good at saying what he thought people wanted to hear. The real test would be what he does when he gets out. He won't be getting out for a very long time. Sarah nodded, watching Emma grab for a stuffed elephant that was just out of reach. Good. Emma deserves to grow up without his chaos in her life. Hawk moved to help Emma reach her toy, and she rewarded him with a delighted giggle. She's going to know she's loved, he said. She's going to know she's safe, and she's going to know that her mother is the strongest person in the world. Sarah smiled, feeling the deep contentment that had replaced the anger and pain she'd carried for so long. She's going to know that sometimes life breaks you down, but you always have the choice to build something better from the pieces. As evening fell and they put Emma to bed, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, she'd been a broken woman sleeping in her car, pregnant and abandoned, with no resources and no hope. Tonight, she was the successful director of a national nonprofit organization, married to a man who loved and respected her, mother to a healthy daughter who would grow up knowing her worth was never dependent on anyone else's approval. The best revenge, Sarah had learned, wasn't destroying your enemies. It was becoming so successful, so happy, so completely yourself that their opinions became irrelevant. Marcus and Victoria had tried to write her story for her, casting her as the bitter ex-wife, the abandoned woman, the victim who deserved whatever happened to her. Instead, Sarah had taken control of her own narrative, transforming herself from victim to survivor to victor. As she kissed Emma goodnight and turned off the nursery light, Sarah whispered the words she said every evening. "Sweet dreams, little warrior. Tomorrow we'll change the world together." Outside, New York City glittered with possibility, full of people facing their own battles, their own betrayals, their own chances to choose who they wanted to become. Sarah's story was one of thousands playing out in the city's lights, but it carried a message that would resonate long after the headlines faded. You are not defined by what happens to you. You are defined by how you choose to respond. And no matter how broken you feel, you always have the power to write your own ending.